We've got the scars out of the way. It's time to talk some news. And let's start in St. Louis because why not? St. Louis City, after a blissful start to MLS life, where they topped the Western Conference in year one, had a bit of a rougher second season, which resulted in firing Bradley Carnell halfway through the year. After getting their team healthy, adding strong reinforcements, and hiring a new coach in Olof Mellberg, they sit 14th in the West with 11 points, 2 wins, and are not in the wooden spoon race just yet, thanks to the LA Galaxy. Due to this start, Olof Mellberg has been released from his job, now owning the second shortest tenure in MLS history as a coach. The sound that you hear is the anti-MLS crowd crying as they try to convince everybody that they walk by that there are no consequences in MLS without pro rel, even though coaches are getting fired left, right, and center. But the question is St. Louis jumping the gun? Is this just far too soon?
No, no. I mean, come on. They're sitting on 11 goals scored in 15 appearances so far. Like, you got to change it up. I mean, listen, I don't remember if we talked about this at the start of the season, so I don't want to I might be contradicting myself here, but I don't really get the route they were going with this one, considering that Mellberg has only coached in what looks like Sweden or Finland, possibly, and has never even like played in Major League Soccer or even like the Bundesliga. So I just not really getting the direction of the coach hire. I kind of feel like they swung and missed on this one because this team is like we talked about it in their first year. They have an identity, right? And their identity is Bundesliga. So I think you really can't go wrong if you bring in someone with MLS experience, regardless of what route you're going with. Like at the end of the day, that's still the league you're playing in. But I feel like the alternative is you could go the Bundesliga route and just get a guy that's familiar with, how they play in the Bundesliga. And, a lot of guys being from or like coming over from that league will have experience to be able to kind of like mesh into that system pretty easily. So I don't really get the direction that they were going with bringing in Mellberg. So, I don't necessarily think that this is the wrong move to move on this quickly. So, they have enough talent to turn things around. I think it's, a good opportunity for them to bring in somebody who can still make the most of the season. I think they're out of the question for supporter shield at this point, but almost anybody that's not named the LA Galaxy or CF Montreal is probably still in the race for the playoffs right now. So, there's time for them to turn things around and still make a good push. So I don't necessarily think this is too fast.
Yeah, definitely in Sweden, by the way, is where he coached. But I remember talking about this when we hired or when he got hired, that it was like it didn't make sense because of the way that they were building and what he had done. I mean, there was this whole thing that he was a coach who could get a lot out of nothing, and he took his team from the third division to the first division in successive promotions in Sweden, and whatever reason he chose not to renew his contract before coaching in the top flight of Sweden. Then he goes to Denmark, and he was there. He was in Denmark for 2 months. I'm reading this now. 2 months before he leaves to go back to the Swedish first division, and then got them relegated. It was like it just didn't make sense, this hire, for what they were trying to do. But they brought him in anyway for whatever the vision is. And this is where it all doesn't make sense to me, because the report had come out that the reason that he got let go is because he wasn't playing the style of soccer that the front office want. Didn't they hire him in the first place?
I know.
The issue isn't that, he didn't have the chance to implement his style, or he didn't get the team that he wants. You hired him thinking that he was going to be plug and play with the team that you had, which isn't a bad idea considering the roster that you had, right? I think we both agreed that when St. Louis came in, that roster was a roster that should have been firing at the very least pushing for top four, if not comfortably in the regular playoff spots. But if you're sitting here 15 games into the season, you're like, this isn't what we signed up for. We need to go somewhere else. Your issue isn't the coach, right? Is it too soon? Is it not too soon? Arguable, right? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But if that's your takeaway from 15 games, the issue is not the coach. Who's dropped the ball on scouting this guy and his style of play? Right? This isn't 1935. You can find film on any pro team anywhere in the world. Did nobody watch his style and they just brought him in for an interview? It was like, oh, what'd you do? Oh, you had two promotions back to back. oh, you're in because that's what we need in American soccer is promotions, right? Like, who dropped the ball on this?
Yeah, yeah, I'd agree with you on that one. I mean, it kind of it reeks of like we didn't properly do our homework on this one and maybe just like rushed somebody in for the sake of having somebody. Whereas like, maybe it is best to kind of like take some time on it. I mean, that's what Minnesota did, and it wasn't like it killed their season.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's kind of the whole focus is like we put it out there all the time that MLS is not an easy league to get accustomed to, right? It's not something you come in, you're just like, oh yeah, it's the third division in Sweden. I'm gonna walk in and take these guys to the top, no problem. It's not easy to get yourself used to the way that this works. So giving somebody 15 games and being like, yep, you didn't do what we want to do, you're out. I don't think it's necessarily fair, regardless of which style you want to play or which direction you want the team to go. St. Louis are underperforming, no doubt about it, and they should be higher where they're at. But is that a coach problem? Maybe. Is it the front office's problem because they hired the guy that wasn't a good fit anyway? Absolutely. Right. So, I put this question in there in the notes that we had, like, is it a coach problem or a roster problem? To me, I don't think it's either. I think it's the front office's problem because they took two puzzle pieces and tried to make them fit when they very clearly were not going to fit. Right? The coaches don't bend their system of play because they're told to, and not every player is going to fit a specific system. So you either give him time to take this team and mold it into what he wants his system to look like, or you don't bring him in the first place and you take somebody who's going to take your team and implement the system that you want. But the fact that you just brought him in and was like, yep, this is the guy because he's got a cool beard and he played in the World Cup in 2006. What are we doing?
No, I agree with you that I think it's the front office. I don't think this is necessarily an indictment that like Mellberg's a bad coach. It's 15 games in a brand new league. There should be enough time to adapt. I don't think 15 is enough to adapt, but I don't necessarily think, I'm not necessarily jumping to like, oh, they got rid of him too quickly because I just don't think this was the right situation for either party, to be honest. As much as we want to be able to say like, oh, the front office should have done their homework a little bit better. I mean, Melberg still agreed to this contract knowing what he's coming into as well. It's not a mystery who was going to be on the roster. You could do a little bit of homework and be like, all right, a lot of Bundesliga guys on this team, probably a lot of MLS guys on this team. If I'm going to come into this job compared to what I've done so far in my career, I'm probably going to have to be flexible or make some changes. Like, I still think most of the blame goes to the front office, but Mellberg agreed to come here. It wasn't like he was forced against his will to come here and deal with the situation. Like he should know what he's coming into, and he should know what players he's going to have available to him. And I think, if he is being stuck to his system, then he needs to be willing to be more flexible if you're going to switch out of a league, and like possibly not have that same level of success that you've had previously.
Yeah, listen, he definitely took the job and he seemed excited. He seemed like he was ready to go, but very very big miss on this one for sure. But you may have noticed that in the preview I mentioned that this is the second shortest tenure in MLS history because the first belongs to a friend of ours, Miguel Angel Ramirez in Charlotte, who famously showed up the day before their first ever game in history and said that they were, and I'm paraphrasing, royally screwed because the roster sucked and they weren't going to win anything because the team didn't invest properly. He was fired after 14 games. Mellberg was not that dismal about his time and his team, but he's also gone. Just to talk about how Charlotte has advanced since the Miguel Angel Ramirez days, they went on to Christian Latanzio after that, who did all right, but he only snuck them in to the play-in game. After that year, he was removed for Dean Smith, who then got them to the first round of the playoffs last year before losing to Orlando. He's now in his second year and has them fighting for a play-in spot with a roster significantly better than they've ever had before. Charlotte's been okay, not great, after all this nonsense between coaches. But now we're going to St. Louis, who is going on manager 4, maybe 5, since they joined the league 3 years ago. And they seem on pace to miss the playoffs for the second straight season if something doesn't change. Likewise, they also have yet to record a win in the playoffs. They got swept in the first round by the number 8 seed, Sporting Kansas City, their rivals. Will St. Louis ever get back to the top with this I guess inconsistency for lack of a better term.
I mean, if I'm going to take a glass half full approach here, I
Lame.
like that the both the teams, Charlotte and St. Louis, are not willing to settle for poor results or mediocrity. It seems like both teams are pretty hungry to build the teams and be successful. I mean, like just look at the transfer policy for Charlotte. I mean, they were constantly throwing their name in the ring for big time players to bring over to their team, and they finally got one across in bringing in Zaha this last offseason. So I think it's like for the fan base, I would think that, to an extent, it's a good sign that the owners are in the mindset of like we want to win, we want to be successful, as opposed to a situation like KC or who's another good example? I mean, even Red Bull, right? Where you kind of just settle for making the playoffs every year and then just
How
selling your
dare
players
you?
on. Are you
That
going to say I'm
disrespect is
wrong?
that disrespect is not warranted on this episode. So
You weren't expecting that shots fired, were you?
no, I didn't need to catch a stray like that today. But you know what? Here we are.
But yeah, so if here's the thing though, because you could take it too far. So you can, I think there's a good balance where you have a hungry ownership that wants to be successful, and then you become too far when you become a Watford. For those familiar with what's going like the English game, Watford is like a revolving door of managers from everything that I remember hearing. Just constantly new guys in all the time. And that has not resulted in success for them. I mean, they've been in the championship for a while now. Like I think that's where you get too far. I mean, you're not allowing your players to develop under a constant system, and it's harder for guys to develop because they're constantly having to learn new things from different coaches. So, it's kind of like a bell curve. I know you love your statistics and your bell curves. So, you got to find that sweet spot at the top where you keep that hunger, but you don't let it go overboard to where you're now stagnating yourself.
Yeah, that's a lot of words to describe. How do I put this nicely? They need to figure this out. Like I said, I'm not even gonna. I want. I was gonna try and make some joke to like poke fun at you. I'm not even gonna do that. They got to figure this out. It's you cannot have success without consistency in your play style, consistency in your message, right? They need to find somebody who they can trust to take control for a few years and run with it. This really feels to me like the front office is out here trying to disprove this like no consequences in MLS thing way too hard. Right? They're just firing managers for fun at any slight inconvenience. They're Chelsea. They're basically Chelsea. I'm sorry. Did you not wear pointed toe shoot? Gone. Next. 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 Like, what are we doing here? How are you like Bradley Carnell goes wins the West in their first ever game in their first ever season, and then a quarter of the way through the season, I forget how long it was. He's having a slight struggle, and you're like, nope, he's out. You let an interim take over for the rest of the year to replace him with this guy, and then after 15 games, he's out again. You're on the look for another manager. It feels insane to me, right? They got to calm down. They got to figure out where they want to go and who's going to get them there. This roster's solid. They don't need to reinvent the wheel. Just find somebody you can trust to get you through these bumps. Because I promise you, you're not going to get any higher up this table if you just keep rotating managers in and out, in and out, in and out.
Yeah, I mean that's what I was saying. They're trending towards being like a Watford where you're just new manager in like twice a year at least, and then you
Mm-hmm.
get yourself stuck and you can't advance any further because it's hard for your players to kind of adapt to a new system every 6 months or 3 months.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah. So you started speaking Eurosnob, and I tuned out.
That yeah, that usually is where your brain shuts off.
Yeah. Once you mentioned anybody outside the continental United States, I was like, nope, no, thank you. Don't like.